In the words of Nelson Mandela, to deny people their human rights is to challenge their very humanity. Yet, as history reminds us, those rights can vanish in the blink of an eye if we aren't vigilant. Welcome to Veil of Time, where we uncover the hidden threads of history, tracing patterns of control, resistance, and freedom. Today we're diving into a subject that's not just a relic of dusty history books. It's something we all need to think about right here, right now. Tyranny. It's a powerful word, isn't it? You hear it, and you might think of some far-off country or a black and white photo of a dictator giving a fiery speech. The word itself feels heavy, conjuring images of oppressive regimes, censored voices, and people living in fear. But here's the thing. Tyranny doesn't always storm through the front door, with flags waving and armies marching. Sometimes it sneaks in softly, masked by smiles, disguised in the language of protection or unity, or wrapped in something as ordinary as a policy change or a harmless-looking rule. Think about it. When we picture tyranny, we often picture the worst extremes, those larger-than-life moments in history when a dictator is in full control, and it's painfully obvious to everyone. But in reality, tyranny rarely starts with a loud announcement. Instead, it often begins quietly, subtly, catching people off guard. It can look like a new rule that seems practical, a restriction framed as for the common good, or a leader asking us to put a little more trust in authority just for now. But by the time most people realize what's happening, it's often too late to push back. So today, let's dig deeper. Let's look at tyranny as it really is. Not just the terrifying regimes we learn about in school, but as something that can grow from small beginnings, nurtured by complacency and silence. What can we learn from the past that might help us recognize those warning signs before they're full-blown sirens? How can we spot tyranny not just in the obvious, but in the quiet, seemingly harmless places it often starts? The lessons we're about to discuss aren't just history, they're warnings, roadmaps from people who've seen firsthand how societies can shift from freedom to control in the blink of an eye. And as you'll see, these lessons are more relevant now than ever before. Because no matter how secure or free we feel today, history has a way of reminding us that freedom isn't permanent, and tyranny isn't always a stranger. So let's take a closer look at how we can recognize it, stop it, and protect ourselves and each other from its grip. Today we're walking through some critical lessons inspired by tyranny. Not the typical dry history lesson, I promise. We're going to break down tyranny into bite-sized pieces. So grab a coffee, settle in, and let's get real. Don't obey in advance. Our first lesson, don't obey in advance. You see, in every society that slipped into authoritarianism, citizens have often preemptively obeyed. They went along with things because they assumed it was inevitable. But compliance is contagious. When we willingly give up a bit of our freedom, it signals to others that they should too. When was the last time you saw someone follow a rule they didn't agree with? Did you think, hey, what's the harm? Well, it's not just about the rule, it's about the ripple effect. Every tiny compliance fuels a bigger wave. Think of it as planting seeds. When we sow obedience, we grow conformity. Defend institutions. Next up, defending institutions. Imagine a community without courts, schools, or independent media. These aren't just buildings. There are defenses against tyranny. When these institutions weaken, society's foundation begins to crack. Think of institutions as the immune system of society. Would you just ignore your immune system until you were sick? Of course not. It's the same here. We need to support institutions that hold leaders accountable. Otherwise, well, history has shown us what happens. Beware the one-party state. Ah, the one-party state. It sounds like something from a history book, right? But it's a real threat. A single-party system means there's no debate, no opposition, no choice. And as anyone who's ever ordered the only item on the menu knows, it's a recipe for disaster.
What is the sure recipe for economic and political tyranny? The late Dr. Milton Friedman said it best. He said that when economic and political power are concentrated in the same hands, that is a sure recipe for political and economic tyranny, just for plain old tyranny. That's what we're moving in the United States, where economic and political power is concentrated in the central government. You will have less freedom, the government will have more. You're transferring your power, your well-being to government. You paid the price. You'll become more and more a serf of government. If that's what you want, that's okay. But realize there's always consequences.
When there's no alternative, we lose the power to hold leaders accountable. It's a slippery slope that's ended poorly more times than we can count. The takeaway? Demand choices, demand voices, and remember, even in democracies, a single ideology can take over if left unchecked. Stand up for truth. Now here's a big one. Standing up for truth. We live in an era where rumors travel faster than facts. Let's face it, how often do we share something just because it sounds interesting, not because it's true? When's the last time you saw facts get in the way of a good rumor? Yeah, exactly. But when we let propaganda rule, we give tyrants exactly what they want. Their best weapon is confusion, not control. So be critical, ask questions, dig deeper, because if truth becomes a casualty, democracy won't be far behind. Be wary of symbols. Tyrants love their symbols. A flag here, a catchy slogan there. Suddenly, these symbols start carrying a meaning far beyond patriotism. When we let symbols define our identity, we give power to the people who control those symbols. Be proud, sure, but don't let symbols do the thinking for you. Blind allegiance is just what tyrants love. Ask yourself, what does this symbol truly represent? Is it unity, or is it just a tool for control? Remember, professional ethics. When professionals, journalists, doctors, lawyers stick to their ethics, they create an unbreakable shield against tyranny. But when those standards slip, that shield starts to crack. A journalist who avoids hard questions, a doctor who stops caring about patient rights, a lawyer who looks the other way when justice is compromised. These aren't just minor lapses in judgment. These are cracks in the wall that protects us all from the slow creep of control. Professionals in every field carry a unique responsibility. Journalists, doctors, teachers, lawyers. These aren't just jobs. They are roles that carry immense trust from society. They're the frontline defenders of truth, justice, and individual rights. Imagine a world where journalists only report what's convenient or what pleases those in power. How quickly would the truth disappear under a blanket of propaganda and half-truths? When journalists stop asking the hard questions, it's not just a profession that suffers, it's society as a whole. In times of crisis or controversy, it's the courage of journalists to ask tough, uncomfortable questions that often keeps the public informed and the powerful accountable. And doctors, when a doctor starts to prioritize profit over patient care or expediency over ethics, we're left vulnerable in ways that are more than just physical. Doctors are sworn to do no harm, but when that oath is set aside for any reason, it's a signal that individual rights can be compromised under the guise of necessity. Patient rights might seem like an individual matter, but they're a reflection of a society's respect for the dignity and autonomy of its citizens. Once those rights are ignored or dismissed, the doors open to policies that view people as numbers or data points, rather than individuals with inherent value. Then there are the lawyers, educators, scientists, professionals whose work has the power to shape the very fabric of society. When lawyers choose not to defend justice for all, or teachers start avoiding certain topics because they're controversial, they're not just avoiding conflict, they're allowing seeds of control to be planted. Little by little, a society that accepts these compromises becomes accustomed to a version of truth that's carefully curated and often distorted. Each one of these roles carries a significant power, but only if that power is used with integrity, courage, and a sense of duty. Because it's the ethical backbone of these professionals that keeps society strong, fair, and resistant to tyranny. When professionals stand firm, when they refuse to be swayed by convenience, fear, or influence, they act as a safeguard, protecting us all from the erosion of our freedoms.
Simply put, ethics are decision-making frameworks. a means of articulating the objective you're trying to achieve, critically analyzing that objective to ensure it's the best one that you can achieve, and finally, and perhaps most importantly, ensuring that all of the things that you are doing, all of the time, effort and resources you're pouring into trying to achieve that objective are in fact going to achieve that objective. Unfortunately, there's a bit of a misconception that ethics are simply a matter of being nice, being pleasant to each other, being polite, or that ethics are simply a matter of following the law.
Be kind to strangers. Here's one that might surprise you. Kindness as a weapon against tyranny. Why? Because fear divides and kindness unites. When people start to view strangers as threats, division grows, and tyrants love division. It makes us easier to control. So, be kind, because kindness builds bridges, and those bridges can't be easily broken. If we're connected, we're harder to divide, and therefore, harder to rule. Learn from history. Finally, the big one, learn from history. We've all heard the saying, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. It's true. Look back at every time tyranny took root. There were always warning signs. Are we paying attention? Tyranny doesn't usually crash through the door. It sneaks in, one step at a time, waiting for us to ignore it. So let's remember, let's learn, and let's stay vigilant. Each of these lessons is a call to action, not just for some far-off land, but for all of us, wherever we live. Because freedom isn't a permanent gift, it's a constant battle. And if we aren't fighting for it, then who is? So where do we go from here? Start by questioning, by connecting, by learning. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and let's keep this conversation alive. History might repeat itself, but not if we're paying attention. Thanks for watching Veil of Time. Subscribe to explore the hidden depths of history and keep the lessons alive, because every veil lifted brings us closer to the truth.